Good morning, good morning. Was the bowl too alarming? Did I frighten you? I'm Reverend Audette Fulbright Fulson. I'm the lead minister here at UU Asheville, and whether you're joining us here in the sanctuary or out there, we are so glad you're here. Whoever you are, whomever you love, however you identify, whatever your seeking is that brings you here today, we are so glad to be together. And we're also grateful for everyone who makes this place possible, everyone from the artists and gentle hands that put our flowers together, to our music with Dr. Les, to my husband Rob, who's filling in on sound back there, the tech, to Shawn, who's here, our ushers and greeters, John, who made the coffee this morning. That's somebody you really have to give an extra high five or hug to, right? Yes. You're free to clap, laugh, or talk today. I just want you to know, don't feel constrained. But as we gather together this morning, I want to invite you just to take a moment, breathe in, let yourself arrive in this place as I share some words written by my dear friends Wendy Bartell and Lynn Gardner. From our separate joys and struggles, we come here to find the peace of balance, to find the blessing of restlessness. All are welcome to follow, to lead, to teach, to learn, to join in the dance, to catch our breath, to give generously, to receive gratefully. All are welcome. And now, with gratitude, let us prepare our hearts for worship by the song that is in our heart and on the piano this morning.
Good morning. Alexis de Tocqueville said, "Nothing is more wonderful than the art of being free, but nothing is harder to learn to use than freedom." As we light our chalice, the lamp of our free and always searching faith, let us commit yet again, as our foreparents did, to the art and efforts of freedom for ourselves and for our posterity. And now, if you'll rise and body your spirit as we sing our first hymn, The Fire of Commitment, 1028. You'll find the words on screen and in the teal hymnal in front of you. Now is the time where we sing our kids out to their summer band book reading program. The kids have been exploring banned books all summer during service, and so we would like to invite any parents, especially if you're new with your kids today, to go down with your kids as they go to religious exploration, meet the group leaders, and find out where you can pick your kids up afterwards. So we'll sing them out.
And now is the time in our service when we pause, when we take a moment to settle in, to deepen a little bit. And if you will, just set your hearts, your minds, maybe your body for a time of meditation and prayer. Breathe with me. Inhale, inspire, inspiration, ruach, pneuma, spiritus, Holy Spirit, the many names for breath. Breathe with us. We breathe in the breath of Jesus, of Moses, of Mohammed, of the Buddha, and every being who has come before us. We breathe and know that we are all interdependent, that the spirit of life flows through us all. We breathe in awareness of the suffering of the world and breathe out peace. We breathe in awareness of our deep joys and great gladness, and we breathe out love. We breathe in awareness as we come together to do the holy work of interconnection and relationship. May our efforts in the days ahead be blessed. May we leave nothing undone that might serve the greater good, and may no love that we can offer go unshared. And now into the silence, laced only with the sounds of our shared breathing, for a few moments we lift our own personal prayers. Amen. And today I have some news to share, the two sorrows that we will be sharing together as a community. The first is that James Weekly, who some of you may have known, he was a member here from 1996 until 2010. He died last month at his home in Kentucky. He was survived by his wife Marlon, his brother, and his two sons. But perhaps closer to folks here and our hearts, Cecilia Rollins, she died on August 2nd. And most of you know that for 5 years she lived with progressive supranuclear palsy, and she was so patient, so graceful, so present throughout that. So even though she lost her ability to move her body and then in time to speak, her mind was always alert. She still loved poetry right up until the end. She also loved this congregation, and a memorial will take place here sometime soon. We'll let you know when that date has been determined. So in memory of Jim Weekly and Cecilia Rollins, we light this candle of remembrance. And now is the time in our service when, as we hold these things in our heart, we also share our joys and concerns with a ritual of rocks, salt, and flowers. And into this common vessel, we sprinkle flower petals, which represent those joys and gladnesses that we carry. And into the vessel, we also sprinkle salt, which carries the salt of our tears and the grains of those things that rub against our soul and bring us sorrow. And so we want to invite you now, if you'd like to share in this ritual, please line up right there, 2 lines. They'll come forward. You can choose a rock to place into our vessel as you go out. If you'll stay in your line and circle back around, that helps the flow. But we will now share a ritual of joys and sorrows. As we breathe into this time, holding all of these things in our heart, we also place 2 more pebbles into the water to represent the joys and concerns of the larger community who are with us in spirit when not here with us in the sanctuary. Amen.
Our reading this morning is a letter posted by Heather Cox Richardson, July 28th, 2024, which was last Sunday. Abridged version. Abridged, yes, please hold on. Just a week ago, it seems, a new America began. I've struggled ever since to figure out what the apparent sudden revolution in our politics means. I keep coming back to the Ernest Hemingway quote about how bankruptcy happens. He said it happens in 2 stages, first gradually and then suddenly. And that's how scholars say that fascism happens too. First slowly and then all at once. And that is what has been keeping us up at night. But the more I think about it, the more I think maybe democracy happens the same way too. Slowly, and then all at once. At this country's most important revolutionary moments, it has seemed as if the country has turned on a dime. In 1763, just after the end of the French and Indian War, American colonists loved that they were part of the British Empire. And yet by 1776, just a little more than a decade later, they had declared independence from that empire and set down the principles that everyone has a right to be treated equally before the law and to have say in their government. The same pattern was true in the 1920s when it seemed as if business interests and governments were so deeply entwined that it was only a question of time until the United States went down the same dark path to fascism that so many other nations did in that era. In 1927, after the execution of immigrant anarchists Sacco and Vanzetti, poet John Dos Passos wrote, "They have plubbed us of the streets. They are stronger, they are rich, they hire and fire the politicians, the newspaper editors, the old judges, the small men with reputations." And yet just 5 years later, voters elected Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who promised Americans a New Deal and ushered in a country that regulated businesses and provided a basic social safety net, promoted infrastructure, and protected civil rights. Every time we expand democracy, it seems we get complacent, thinking it's a done deal. We forget that democracy is a process and that it is never finished. And when we get complacent, people who want power use our system to take over our government. They get control of the Senate, the White House, the Supreme Court, and they begin to undermine the principles that we should be treated equally before the law and to chip away at the idea that we have a right to say in our government. And it starts to seem like we have lost our democracy. But all the while, there are people who keep the faith. Lawmakers, of course, but also teachers and journalists and musicians and artists who push back against the fear by reminding us of love and family and community. And in those communities, people begin to organize. The marginalized people, who are the first to feel the bite of reaction, and the grassroots groups. They keep the embers of democracy alive. And then something fans them into flames. The last several decades have felt like we're fighting a holding action, then trying to protect democracy first from an oligarchy and then from a dictator. Many Americans saw their rights being stripped away even as they were quietly becoming stronger. That strength showed in the Women's March of January 2017, and it continued to grow quietly under Donald Trump, and more openly under the protections of the Biden administration. People began to organize in school boards and state legislatures and Congress. They also began to organize over TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and newsletters and Zoom calls. And then something else set them ablaze. The 2022 Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization decision, which stripped away from the American people a constitutional right that they had enjoyed for almost 50 years and made it clear that a small minority intended to destroy democracy and to replace it with a dictatorship based in Christian nationalism. But now, the torch has been passed to us. It is up to us to decide whether we want a country based on fear or on facts, on reaction or on reality, on hatred or on hope. It is up to us whether it will be fascism or democracy that, in the end, moves swiftly, and up to us whether we will choose to follow in the footsteps of those Americans who came before us, and in our noblest moments, to launch a brand new era in American democracy.
So if you saw the e-news this week, you will know that you, the congregation, are helping to provide some of the music today in this service. So for your first song, we're going to sing Circle Round for Freedom. And we have a video. In a minute, we'll show you a video that has the words, and we're going to sing along with the video. But first, I'm going to play the tune. The song can also be found on page 155 in the gray hymnal. So I'm going to play the tune so you can hear it. Then we'll hear it sung one time on the video, and then we'll sing along with the video, and I'll cue you the whole time. So here's the tune. and that repeats. So if we can have the video. So we're going to listen.
Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children. Keep the circle whole.
We sing.
Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children. Keep the circle whole.
Now sing some harmonies.
Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children. Keep the circle whole.
Thank you for creating beauty this morning. Barbara F. Walter is the Rohr Professor of International Relations at the School of Global Policy and Strategy at the University of California at San Diego. Don't you wish you were her just introducing yourself all the time? She does have an area of special study, autocracies. Now, this isn't a word with which I was familiar until more recently. According to Walter, autocracies are neither fully democratic nor fully autocratic. Their citizens enjoy some elements of democratic rule, for example, elections, while other rights, e.g. due process or freedom of the press, suffer. Walter argues that the U.S. has fallen into autocracy once and are vulnerable yet again. We are vulnerable yet again. Quote, in the last weeks of Donald Trump's presidency, the respected Center for Systemic Peace calculated that for the first time in more than 2 centuries, the United States no longer qualified as a democracy. It had, over the preceding 5 years, become an autocracy. That rating improved again to democracy in late January of 2020, rising by a mere 3 points, which is still vulnerable. All of this might come as a shock to many Americans. Democratic backsliding had happened incrementally, like the erosion of a shoreline. The process is especially difficult for Americans to recognize because exceptionalism is baked into our founding myth. We are a city on a hill. We are different. But autocracy, not autocracy, is our most immediate threat. Autocracy is usually transitional. A repressive government allows reforms, or a democracy begins to unravel, and it is volatile. When a country moves into the autocracy zone, the risk of political violence reaches its peak. Citizens feel uncertain about their government's power and legitimacy. Compared with democracies, autocracies with more democratic than autocratic features are 3 times more likely to experience political instability. End quote. Autocracy is that vulnerable middle state, the place between a restored democracy or a fall into autocracy, which, just so that we're all on the same page, because especially these political words sometimes have different understandings or different meanings, autocracy is defined by a government ruled by an individual with a supreme executive power. For a close example, the European Union has determined that Hungary under Orban is now what they are calling an electoral autocracy, which is the most common form. Elections, which are usually rigged, give the pretense that the people can weigh in. Russia, of course, and more recently Venezuela are variations on this theme. Autocracies have certain hallmarks. According to Robert Longley, quote, compared to complex representative systems of government, such as the United States system of federalism, the structure of an autocracy is relatively simple. There is the autocrat and little else. However, no matter how personally forceful or charismatic they may be, autocrats still require some sort of power structure to both retain and apply their rule. Historically, autocrats have depended on nobles, business moguls, militaries, or ruthless priesthoods to maintain their power. Since these are often the same groups that may turn against the autocrats and depose them through a coup d'etat or mass insurrection, they are often forced to satisfy the needs of the elite minority over the needs of the general public. For example, social welfare programs are rare to non-existent, while policies to increase the wealth of supportive business oligarchs or the power of the loyal military are common. Many modern autocrats take a more indirect and disingenuous path to power than, say, for example, President Xi of China. Again, Putin, Orban, Maduro all allow a pretend version of democratic process while maintaining a personal and elite control of the state's resources, using them for personal gain and wielding the violence of the state, as well as the power of the government and courts against their perceived enemies. Now, the risks are before us, more towards the closer step of anocracy, which is plenty dangerous enough. But here's the reason we're talking about this today, here in our sanctuary, where we gather for spiritual sustenance and moral courage. Because throughout the long history of our faith, we have always found our strength in throwing wide the doors to a more just world, for welcoming people as they are, for lifting up all voices, believing we are stronger when we embrace diversity of both thought and experience. We have been and continue to be explicitly committed to the practice of democracy in our congregations and beyond, believing that all people should have a voice in their governance. And I hope that it's obvious, but anocracy and autocracy are contrary to democracy, and thus we are, by our Unitarian Universalist faith, opposed to both. It is quite literally the core of who we are. Now, we're not alone in our belief in a technically federalist but generally representative form of democracy. And more importantly, we're certainly not alone in wanting to preserve and protect it. And this is going to be where we end this morning, talking about the power of joy, of laughter and connection as we keep striving for a better world. But even as Rachel Maddow and others outline the threats that the careful placement of election officials in swing states, officials who have openly committed to being willing to refuse to certify election results, potentially throwing election night and beyond into chaos, others are also at work. For example, on July 30th, Barton Gellman, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and a senior fellow at the Brennan Center for Justice, wrote in the Washington Post that he has been wargaming. He said, participants in our exercises, 175 in all, included Democrats, Republicans, liberals and conservatives, independents and centrists. Many had held senior positions under Trump or a previous president. Among them were former cabinet secretaries, former governors and state attorneys general, former members of the House and of the Senate, a retired ambassador, retired flag and general officers, a retired federal appellate judge, labor leaders, faith leaders, grassroots organizers, members of the Brennan Center staff and C-suite executives. We gathered twice by video conference and 3 times in a hotel conference room outside of Washington for 6-hour sessions around a large U-shaped table. About 35 players per game were assigned to different teams. The players announced their moves, their counter moves. They negotiated, interrupted one another, occasionally tried to shout over our unflappable controller, Ed McGrady, who is an experienced game architect. We focused not on usual policy, but instead on threats to democracy itself and the institutions which uphold it, such as misuse of regulatory or prosecutorial powers to punish political foes. None of these exercises left us sanguine. Participants were almost uniformly sobered by the paucity of effective constraints on abuse of power. The exercises showed emphatically that implementing details in the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025 pose a profound threat to constitutional government. Defenders of democracy, our participants assessed, must do more than they are doing now to prepare. The exercises suggest that it would not be possible to block every abuse, but there are tools available to deflect, delay, and diminish the damage. At one point, Bill Kristol was playing a President Trump in the exercises, and people were deeply dismayed at how effective he was at his process. Let me cut to the chase, really. The point is, we all need to be actively a part of solutions, of strengthening our democracy by building and participating in coalitions, in strategizing, serving our communities, for example, as poll workers, or in get out the vote efforts, running for office, or supporting candidates who share our values, offering comfort and support to each other, planning now to have protective strategies for vulnerable populations, talking about the things we care about with people who feel differently from ourselves, and regaining our essential identity as competent and compassionate members of a flourishing multiracial democracy, and remembering most of all our essential Unitarian Universalist theology, that we are all in this together, and wherever we are going there together. One of my favorite lines in the Lord of the Rings is when the wizard Gandalf reminds Frodo, "There is more at work in this world than the will of evil, Frodo." Perhaps you, like me, have been reminded of this over the last few weeks when we have seen at least one profoundly impactful example of a political leader who chose to place his country over his own ego. As Heather Cock-Richardson reminded us in the reading I chose for today, maybe she's a Gandalf for our own age. Progress and hope and more democracy are possible in any moment, too. Consider the election in France only weeks ago, when it seemed as though the heirs of fascism would win the day. Left-leaning and centrist-leaning people came together to make hard decisions to forestall a dangerous threat. Those who are old enough, consider how it felt in the years before Obergefell, before marriage equality. It seemed like it would be years and years in coming until suddenly it was done. more quickly than almost anyone thought it might be, like the days before Roe and the days since Dobbs. The possibilities always lie in our hands. It is our work to do. And if we take a pass and hope someone else will carry the ball, well, I wish the ring had never come to me, Frodo cries out in despair. I wish none of this had happened. And Gandalf replies, so do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us. So what am I saying? I am saying that our spiritual inheritance is a faith that has come to us through the hands of people who committed again and again, right up until this very summer, to the practices of democracy and the very hard work that it entails. I am saying that to be faithful is to be involved in ways that are small or in ways that are large, with the effort that it requires to maintain a democracy. And I am saying one more thing: laugh. Remember that joy is always possible, and that the thing that does save us, in the parlance of all the schlocky books and films that you may have seen, is the friends that we make along the way. And if Gandalf isn't your jam, remember the words of anarchist and feminist fighter Emma Goldman, who said, if I can't dance, I don't want to be part of your revolution. Emma Goldman, Heather Cox Richardson, Gandalf. What she knew, what we all need to know, is that despots and autocrats and anocracies and autocracies thrive by sapping our joy, making us feel helpless, tricking us into thinking we can't do anything, trying to frustrate and overwhelm us. We fight back, and we fight best by loving more, laughing often, playing and finding joy along the way, and remembering that change is always, always, always possible. And a better world is just as possible as a worse one. Like Arundhati Roy said, on a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. Amen, Ashe, blessed be, Aho.
If you'll rise and bow your spirit, we have our closing hymn. This is my song. It's hymn 159 in our great hymnal. Thank you. That was our closing hymn. Second. Oh, sorry. I'll get through it. We are now turning to the work of the congregation. This is the time where we invite visitors to stand and introduce yourselves. And we have somebody come by with microphones, if you'd like to stand briefly and just let us know your name and from where you are.
Hi, good morning. Sunu, Chandy, and my spouse, Erica. We're visiting from Washington, D.C., and thank you for the sermon. I work at a place called Democracy Forward, a civil rights law, and thank you. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Happy to talk to anyone afterwards. I'm also a poet and have a book, My Dear Comrades, to the Joy Piece, and just here for all of that.
Welcome.
I'm Leslie Boyd. I'm with the Poor People's Campaign, and we are working to preserve democracy because we are the swing vote.
Yes.
My name is Evan Richardson. I'm also with the Poor People's Campaign and here today to invite all of you to join those who have been impacted by systemic racism and poverty in our country, almost half of the people living in this country, to stand beside them to support democracy and actually the fulfillment of what our Constitution says that has never been achieved.
Thank you. And welcome.
Hi, I'm Karina. I'm here with my family, so my dad, Bill, my brother, Diego, and my mom, Patty, and we're here visiting my grandma, Ruth, this week. So yeah, thank you guys for welcoming us in, and it's nice to be here with all of you.
Welcome.
Hello, my name is Bruce. I have been searching for a spiritual community that has my values and respects everyone. And I came across a website for this church, and this is my first visit. I hope to come back.
Welcome. Please do.
Hi, my name is Mike. I'm visiting from Atlanta for the weekend. I've also been searching for a spiritual community, and this is a great one, but I don't think I can do the 180-mile drive every weekend, but it's been fantastic.
Welcome.
It's interesting that several people mentioned being from the Poor People's Campaign because I'm about to start a job for the next 6 weeks helping an organization called the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute. And I know that sounds like a really boring title, but they do a lot of work around policies and activism related to poverty in the Southeast.
Thank
so
you.
I'm really excited about that.
And there's great news in Atlanta.
There's several UU congregations in Atlanta, too.
Hey, I'm Alex. I just moved to Weaverville recently. I work in marketing. I like D&D, and I fall asleep every night listening to Alan Watts. So,
You're home.
Welcome.
Thanks. Looking forward to becoming a member.
Welcome. We got to get a campaign together for the church. Okay.
My name is Norm. I'm from Sarasota. I'm an active UU member, a proud Democrat, leaning Democrat, a Bobby Kennedy Democrat, and I have hope. I think we're moving now, and let's not turn back.
Thank you. And welcome. All right. Thank you to all of our visitors who stood and introduced themselves. We have coffee hour after the service, and so we'd like to meet and talk with you more there. We do have a few announcements. Our primary announcements run as slides at the beginning of the service, and if you miss them, just refer to the weekly e-news. Directly following today's service, the anti-racism team is having, after coffee hour, a screening of Racist Roots, a history of the death penalty in North Carolina. Afterwards, you can participate in postcarding campaign to call Governor Cooper to commute the North Carolina death penalty. Come sign postcards. Also, next Sunday, hosted by Pride Plus, our LGBTQ plus group, there will be a big gay ice cream social. More details are in the e-news. Our community plate recipient for this month is the Poor People's Campaign. So thank you to Leslie and Evan for being here this morning. You can donate by check. If you're donating directly to the community plate, be sure to write community plate into your memo line on the check. All cash donations will be split with our community plate partner. You can also donate online. The work and the ministries of this congregation are entirely supported by the generosity of our members and our friends. And we celebrate your generosity each Sunday with music and thanks. You make us possible, and we give thanks for you. Our offering will now be greatly collected.
In this, the wealthiest country in the world, poverty is rampant. Nearly half of us live in or near poverty, and it is deadly. In fact, it's now the fourth leading cause of death in the United States.
Meanwhile, the wealthiest Americans keep getting richer, while the poor are blamed for their own misery. This is why the Poor People's Campaign is working here in Western North Carolina to mobilize, organize, register, and educate poor and low-wealth people to get to the polls and vote.
This poverty all stems from public policies that favor the wealthy instead of providing for all of us, denying us health care, cutting food assistance, keeping the minimum wage at starvation levels, and more.
There's only one way to change that. If the people making the policies refuse to change, then we must change our policy makers. We have to replace them with lawmakers who share our values.
We know people are tired of hearing this is the most important election in our history, but our democracy is indeed in peril, and we have this chance to shore it up and rebuild what has been dismantled. We know we can do this.
That's because we are the swing vote.
This doesn't mean we're not still trying to talk to lawmakers about the injustices poor people must endure. In late June, when the General Assembly was going to let child care fall off a funding cliff, our people showed up to shed light on how many children, nearly 100,000, might lose their daycare when federal pandemic funding ended on June 30th. The General Assembly did add $67 million in child care funding before they went home.
If we can get the parents of these young children to the polls, we can end the veto-proof majority that keeps attacking our well-being. With enough votes, we can restore and expand funding for public education, food assistance, and more. We can raise the minimum wage to a living wage. We can make the wealthy pay their fair share of the tax burden.
The Western Circle of the North Carolina Poor People's Campaign works with other nonprofits in the new nonpartisan WNC Votes Coalition, which holds canvassing events, tabling at festivals and concerts, and postcard events. We hope to expand the effort beyond Buncombe County by training others.
Working together, we can register new voters and inspire those already registered to get to the polls and vote.
We're calling for a moral revival, a third reconstruction that will give us a nation that cares for its people, all of its people. We are the swing vote, and
we are going forward together, not one step back.
the gift of your wisdom, your time, presence, and your resources. We're grateful. We now have a word from Les.
Please stand if you are able to sing this song.
Thank you.
When the words come up. There we go.
Take a moment. You know, one of the things that I love the most is the number of Indigenous voices who have reclaimed that song and sung it together with us. And now is the time in our service when things begin to draw to a close. I want to share these words from Kathleen McTeague with you to carry us out into our day before we stand again and sing together our closing song. From this home, we bring our hunger for awakening, we bring our compassionate hearts and a will towards justice. From this home, we bring the courage to walk on after hard losses. From this home, we bring our joy and gratitude for ordinary blessings. Because by our gathering, we have blessed this place, and we carry out into the world our blessing from this place. May we go in peace and return in joy. Will you now sing with us our closing song, our son song, Longtime Son?